I think this is my turn, and my name is Nanduri Rajgopal. I'm an
Okay,
associate professor. I'm an associate professor in the Department of English, Central University of Himachal Pradesh, Dharmshala. At the
okay,
same
okay,
time, I'm the director of the Center of Tribal Literature of America here in the university department. My paper's title is Linda Hogan's Trail of Tears Removal. It's an account of Native American relocation. The pattern of discord between European settlers and Native Americans for natural resources has been a familiar singularity. In 1828, Andrew Jackson was elected as the President of the United States of America and served for 2 terms in office. Jackson had been a notable advocate for settlers against indigenous peoples before becoming president. And we know that the Indian Removal Act of 1830 that allowed the voluntary evacuation of Native Americans to the west of the Mississippi River. Unfortunately, government authorities often misused the legislation, culminating in forced relocation of these tribal people. Poems commemorating the tragic events of the Indian removal have emerged since the early 20th century and continue even this day. Through her insistent narrative, Linda Hogan unravels the pretext of the settlers and their ethical penury. Insistent narrative, Linda Hogan basically unravels the pretext of the settlers. This paper critically appreciates and examines the undisclosed account of the tragic event referred to as the Trail of Tears. Through Linda Hogan's poem, Trail of Tears, Our Removal. Long before Europeans arrived, the indigenous Amerindians, they are also known as Amerindians, had established rich and varied culture. The accounts and legacies of the native people were lost or differently interpreted from the settlers' perspective. The early connection between Native Americans and European settlers in the United States was one of affability. But later, the settlers began conquering the land based on racial superiority, religious beliefs, and unrestrained avarice. For the locals, the Europeans brought illnesses and destruction. They brought with them a religion that they used to legitimize their most heinous crimes. The Proclamation of 1763 classified the territory between the Mississippi River and the Appalachian Mountain as indigenous land, but colonists disregarded it and pushed it. The Cherokee tried unsuccessfully to get permission to stay on their territory from the US government and the courts. In his inaugural address as the President of the United States, Andrew Jackson mentioned that, I quote, to observe towards the Indian tribes within our limits a just and liberal policy, and to give that humane and considerate attention to their rights and their wants, which is consistent with the habits of our government and the feelings of our people. But his stance completely altered within 2 years of his presidency. When the settlers had no longer needed the indigenous people to survive, They changed their focus towards acquiring the native land to grow more prosperous. Jack confronted the flawed idea of manifest destiny. The Americans sought gold in Georgia in 1980s. The Indian Removal Act of 1830 was the ultimate culmination of American greed and desire to force native nations from their lands without their consent. Many native tribes were apprehensive of the government's intentions and even protested against the stance. Thus, the term Trail of Tears invokes the collective sufferings of those who experienced it, although it is most commonly used with reference to the removal experiences of the Southeast Indians, generally the Cherokee Nation specifically. The physical trails stretch some 5,045 miles across portions of 9 states, namely Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Illinois, Kentucky, Missouri, North Carolina, Oklahoma, and so on and so forth. The most beloved and admired Native American author, Linda Hogan, was born in 1947 in Denver, Colorado. However, her ancestors come from Oklahoma. She is well-known author across the world. Hogan's poetry collection include Seeing Through the Sun, which was published in 1985, won the American Book Award from the Bill Gates Foundation. The Book of Medicines, a National Book Critics Circle Award finalist in 1993. She has many books to her credit. Linda Hogan's poem Trail of Tears, Our Removal, expresses the pain of Native American dislocation. The Trail of Tears continues to affect Native artists' thought and views of morality, and it can be found in practically all types of arts they make. Since the early 20th century, poets have been writing poems recalling the sad events of the Indian removal. Although every poetry produced by Native Americans references the Trail of Tears to remind the world of the need for justice for what appears to be or what was deliberately neglected by all involved. The poets, whether Native Americans or liberal writers for that matter, new or experienced, use the documented narrative and make specific references to four foremost factors. The one, the catastrophic events and their devastation on the natives. Two, a firm belief in the spirituality and the immortality of the soul. Third, the natural world as a realm where divine spirits roam, providing moral support and empowerment to oppressed souls. And fourth, the perseverance in defending identity and fighting aggression until justice is served. In her poem, Hogan is intense and honest, feeling empowered by her heritage and the legitimacy of her cause. She bluntly exposes the deceptive schemes used by the settlers to usurp Cherokee territory. I quote her: what the prophet had said was true. This land with unseen lines would be taken. So you who live there now, don't forget to love it. Thank it. The place that was once our forest, our ponds, our mosses, the swamplands with birds and more lovely creatures. Unquote. The settler manipulated the norms of primitive existence and the goodwill of rightful owners of their environment. Since then, a clash between a world of and the world of owning emerged. Hogan wants the new uncaring colonial possessors to love and appreciate the motherland. However, greedy settlers gradually deprive Indians of even basic household and belongings. Again, I quote from the same poem: we took clothing, dishes, thinking there would be something to start a new life, believing just one. Horses, so many, one by one stolen, taken by many thieves. Were left longing for trees, for shades, homing, booting, and even for food along the hunger way. She
That
demonstrates how the injustices that strike our nation create hopes and a resolve to fight back against aggression and fight for justice. To conclude, the Trail of Tears has become a reminder of the callousness of American policymakers towards Amerindians throughout American history. Indian lands were held hostage by the states and federal government, and Indians had to agree to removal to preserve their identity as tribes. Conclusively, Linda Hogan's poem continues to narrate the Native American destruction and serves as inspiration for the people to exhibit their tenacity and determination to continue. More decisively, through a tenacious commitment to preserving the people's identity and sovereignty. The poets hope to inspire Native Americans to accept their righteous cause and fiercely oppose the continued violence. Centuries of destructions have failed to eradicate, destroy, mute, or vanquish the indigenous people. The poet hopes that the oppressors' rigorous attempts to stop their identity and compel assimilation have thus far failed. Most importantly, the natives' perseverance in resisting will yield results in the future. Thank you very much. I
thank you,
welcome
Professor.
if any question, any suggestion, any comment. I very humbly welcome. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Professor Gopal. You have beautifully presented your paper on Linda Hogan's Tale of Tears with much evidence about their untold uh, sufferings of this Indians, Native Americans' sufferings. Beautiful, and it's a very illustrative. And audience, if you have any question, kindly please put forward your question for clarification. If not, I will move to the next scholar's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Audience scholars, do you have any questions to raise? Okay, thank you. In that case, shall I invite the next scholar to present his or her paper? Sweta Mo.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
I'm
pa.
audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Good afternoon to one and all present here. I Shweta Moore, a research scholar from Modi University, Rajasthan. The title of my paper is Sula Toni Morrison's A Study of Black Feminism and Intersectionality. As you know, that Toni Morrison's second novel, Sula, is published after The Bluest Eye, which which focuses on the impact of race, class, gender on female characters in this novel. The paper demonstrates how black women face the challenges of patriarchy, caste discrimination, and constraints of tradition. In this novel, Sula represents how different oppressions affect their quest for identity and selfhood establishment. The review depicts the recuperating powers of female holding, which permits ladies to defeat bias and endurance, to appreciate female strengthening, selfhood foundation, and to broaden female fellowship into a female fortitude that takes part in country building. So I will start my paper with the intersectionality. Intersectionality, in its most simplistic form, is a paradigm that requires the examination of how various structures of power, in terms of like gender, race, class, sexuality, culture, history, public policy, affect an individual simultaneously and at given point in time. The intersectional paradigm implores researchers to be aware of these intersections or the crossing points of these various aspects of power, and conversely, marginalization within the hierarchies of social systems in order to reveal the actual abilities that an individual has for choice and agency. So, the intersectional paradigm is especially useful in the examination of my novel Sula, as location is structurally important in novel. Location in Toni Morrison's Sula works twofold in that it offers both stability throughout the novel as well as physical manifestation of the novel. The changes in racial segregation and power structures that occur from slavery to the peak of the civil rights movement in 1965. By locating these changes in policy and their subsequent effects on our protagonist, Sula, and her community, we can determine how
Now,
this public we can determine how this public policy affected the intersections of race, gender, and class in Sula, and consequently either allowed or restricted Sula's attempt at the personal agency. I'll not take too much time, but I conclude the intersectional approach forces the reader to big to dig deeper and understand the true reasons for protagonist choice by considering the social, political, cultural, and historical restrictions he or she might face. Thus, by using the intersectional approach, we can begin to uncover the intersections that these protagonists share as women during large socio-political upheaval. Thank you so much.
thank you, Ma. Thank you for your brief presentation. And your study on Sula Toni Morrison's study of black feminism and intersexuality.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, it clearly talks about the black women's sufferings and the world
Yes,
is always for the white, not for the black. Okay, and
right. Yes.
it talks about the sufferings of this black woman and a nice presentation, a
Yeah,
vivid
thank you.
presentation.
Thank you.
As usual, um, do you have any question from this audience side?
Yeah, anyone is having any question?
Hello,
Hello?
am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, yes.
Has, has anyone wanted to ask any question to her, ma? If not, thank you, ma. Thank you. Let me invite the third person, Miss Monica Gautam. She is going to present her paper on impact of internet, linked digital devices on language usage and communication skills of children and adolescents. Let me invite Miss Monica Gautam, please. Amma, scholars, am I audible? Is Monica Gautam present? Hello? Is Monica Gautam, are you present? Otherwise, shall I move to the next person then? Ashra Afrin. Ashra Afrin, are you present? I wonder what happens. What happens to Monica Gautam? If she is absent, we can move to the fourth scholar, Ashra Afrin. to present her paper on a study of Sophoclean female characters with reference to Electrine and Antigone.
Electricity.
Is it Asra Afrin?
Yes, I'm Asra.
Ma, make it clear, ma. Make it clear. Is it Asra Afrin?
Yes, ma'am, I'm Asra Afrin.
Okay, are you ready to present your paper?
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, you are audible, ma. Am I audible? I would like to know whether I am audible or not.
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Okay, ma. So, you are invited to present your paper.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Asra Afrin, a research scholar studying at Vijayanagara Sri Krishna Dev Raya University, Ballari, Karnataka. The title of my paper is A Study of Sophoclean Female Characters with reference to Electra and Antigone. Sophocles was a 5th century Greek playwright. He wrote 120 plays, out of which only 7 tragedies survive in the full length. This paper considers only two tragedies of Sophocles, Electra and Antigone, to analyze the female characters from these plays. The paper throws light on the construction of gender in Greek society in the 5th century when the plays were written for performance and the resisting female characters from these plays. Women in the 5th century Greek culture were considered subordinate to men. They didn't have the right to vote in the assembly or buy property. They lived in a patriarchal society. They looked after the family and property of their husbands. The Sophoclean female characters are heroic in nature, contrasted to the original society in which women had very few powers. The Sophoclean female characters challenge the social and cultural norms. So the paper analyzes the heroic actions of these female characters which challenge the patriarchal norms and regulations. Women in the 5th century had much role to play at the religious fairs. They became priestesses of the goddesses, participated in the Parthenaic processions, and gave birth to the statues of goddesses. Women made offerings to gods and goddesses. The historical monuments and buildings contain a note. The note contains the name of the women who made offerings along with the name of their fathers, brothers, or husbands, which is an indication of the patriarchal society where women could not have a separate own identity. They had their identity was based on the identity of the male members of the family. The headstones in the cemetery also contain the name of the dead women with the name of their masters, the men of the family. Women were considered weaker than men. Wailing, crying and grieving were the signs associated with women. Women remained at home looking after the household tasks, and men were responsible to earn bread and butter for the family. Men waged wars disclosing their bravery. Many references to the subordination of women have been made in the Sophoclean tragedies. An instance of it is as follows. Chrysothemis from the play Electra says to her sister, "Can't you see you're a woman? That is your nature. You're not a man. You're not as strong as your enemies in a fight." Lines 997 to 98. Electra is a courageous woman who wants to take revenge of her father's murder. She suffers from pain from several years. Ma'am, I would like to pause for just few seconds, ma'am. As some sound is coming from the outside, I'll tell them to stop it. I am giving a little pause here. Hello, ma'am. Ma'am, may I continue, ma'am? Hello, ma'am. May I continue, ma'am?
Hello. You can continue, ma. You can continue.
Yes, ma'am. Electra is a courageous woman who wants to take revenge of her father's murder. She suffers from pain from several years, but her hate has not come to an end. She plans to kill her mother Clytemnestra, who killed Agamemnon, her father. She believes her abilities and tells her sister to join her in punishing Clytemnestra for the murder of their father. Clytemnestra is a woman who believes women are Chrysothemis is her Electra's sister is a woman who believes women are weaker than men, and to win against Clytemnestra and Aegisthus they must have a courageous man on their side. Chrysothemis is sure that standing against her mother is nothing but foolishness because she and Aegisthus are powerful. Electra resists them, telling her grief to the people and by abusing her mother. Women in the 5th century Greece performed funeral rites of the dead. They had much role to perform in the funeral rites. The historical and political tell us about the ritual of grief. Women were paid for mourning the dead. There were professional mourners who paid for wailing at the funerals. In the importance of funeral rites and the role of women in mourning rituals are evident in the play Antigone. Antigone is a girl of good conduct. Her image in the play Oedipus at Colonus displays her as a girl more obedient to her father. She, like other Sophoclean protagonists, is a believer who believes in gods and the and the religious rules strongly. She believes the laws of the divine. She loves her family and brothers more than her life. She puts her life into trouble for the sake of her father, for the sake of her brother. She secretly meets her old father Oedipus and looks after him. She gives up the comforts of the palace and wanders in the deserts with her suffering father. After the death of Oedipus, she returns to the palace in Thebes. Here she finds her brother being fought against each other and killed each other as it was prophesied. Antigone buries the dead body of her brother Polynices against the decree of the king Creon. She strongly believes in the Greek tradition that a dead must be buried properly with all rites in order to peace at Hades. The play Electra highlights the rituals of mourning, burial, and libations. Electra mourns the death of her father since long. She gives up the luxurious life and freedom for the sake of mourning and grieving her father. The play reflects the funeral rites practiced by the Greeks. The Greeks poured libations. An instance to such libations offered at the gravesite is found in the play Electra. I quote Chrysothemis. When I came to father's tomb on the ancient mount, I saw fresh streams of milk springing from the top, and all the flowers that are in bloom were twisted in a wreath to crown father's grave. Line 893 to 96. The Greeks offered libations to the graves. Orestes and Chrysothemis in the play Electra refers to such libations offered by them. Many such instances are found from other tragedies of Sophocles. The Greeks offered milk, honey, water, wine, flowers, and tresses of hair as a respect to the dead. They buried objects such as arms, mirrors, and other items in the grave. The resisting, a subheading here, these resisting female characters in Electra and Antigone. Till now, I showed a picture of women in the Greek century, how that women did not participate in public processions. They remained at home and did household works. That was a patriarchal society. Now, I am gonna analyze how Sophoclean characters, female characters, are contrasting, breaking the rules, religious or cultural rules of the 5th century, and did heroic acts that can be called as modern feminist acts. The resisting female characters in Electra and Antigone. Clytemnestra, Electra, Chrysothemis are the female characters from the play Electra who oppose the social cultural norms and the patriarchal construction of female gender. Clytemnestra, the antagonist of the play Electra, is a very influential character. She kills Agamemnon, her husband, resisting the religious cultural laws that strengthen the female sacrifice. The dialogue by Clytemnestra is very powerful, needs our observation here. I quote, because this father of yours, the one you are always weeping about, was the only Greek hard hearted enough to sacrifice a girl to the gods, your sister. The pains he took to father her were nothing like the pain I had in giving birth. All right, can you convince me he had a reason to sacrifice her? For what? For the Greeks? They had no business killing a girl who belonged to me. Lines 530 to 36. Clytemnestra, as a woman, feels the pain of giving birth to a child. For a mother, both a daughter and a son are equal. She loves her daughter so much so that she not only kills Agamemnon, her husband, for sacrificing her daughter to the gods, but Clytemnestra opposes the ritual of sacrifice. She is brave enough to accept that she has killed her husband as a vengeance of her daughter's sacrifice. She stands against the crime, against the against the sacrifice, the ritual of sacrifice. She stands against the whole cultural norm of the 5th century Greece. Electra stands against the crime done by Clytemnestra. She is against the enemies of her father, Clytemnestra and Aegisthus. She resists the social belief that women are weak. After hearing the news of the death of Orestes, Electra plans to finish her enemies by herself. She is a courageous woman and a faithful daughter. Electra believes in herself and decides to punish her mother and Aegisthus for killing Agamemnon. Electra attempts to persuade her sister Chrysothemis to join her in killing the enemies of their father. Electra's ways are different from her sister's. She is ready to sacrifice her comforts, freedom, and life to achieve her goal. She openly resists her mother and tells of her deeds to the world. Electra dreams of great deeds like a brave warrior. She desires to gain fame in the public. She tells Chrysothemis of the honor they would get from citizens and foreigners who would say, I quote, look, my friends, this is the pair of sisters who saved their father's house. They staked their lives on this when their enemies were all ensconced to bring them to account for murder. Everyone should love and treat them with respect. In festivals or assemblies of the city, everyone should honor them for manly courage. That is the way they all will boost us then, and glorious fame will follow us in life or death. Lines 977 to 985. Chrysosthemis enjoys freedom and comforts by pretending to be faithful to Clytemnestra and Aegisthus. She doesn't like to be sentimental as Electra. Chrysosthemis, Electra's sister, uses her mind to get out of her troubles. I quote, if I were strong enough, I would show them what I think of them, but I have decided that in a storm it is the best to slacken sail and not pretend to take action when you are causing them no pain. Chrysosthemis doesn't show her hatred to her enemies, rather she pretends to be good with them and wins their trust and enjoys her freedom. She seems to be a realistic person who doesn't imagine of struggling against the powerful enemies. She accepted that she is a woman and can't stand against the powerful Clytemnestra and Aegisthus, but she has not accepted them as her friends. She hates them and waits for the right time and right opportunity to take revenge. Antigone, from the play Antigone, is the protagonist of the play. Antigone and her sister Ismene are female characters in the play. Antigone and Ismene take up difficult tasks that are thought to be the duty of men. Oedipus in his old age is cared by his daughters and not by his sons. Antigone and Ismene break the patriarchal image of women by opposing the king Creon and refuse to go to Thebes with Creon. Ismene supports her sister, saying, when Antigone buries the dead body of her brother Polynices by standing against the decree of the king Creon, Ismene supports this deed and says, I did, I quote, I did the deed if she will have it so, and with my sister claim to share the guilt. Antigone, page 145. The refusal of Antigone and Ismene to go to Thebes with Creon is a sign of women's right in making the decisions of their life. Antigone is a woman of good conduct. She is cultured and modern in her actions. She respects the religious, political, and social laws but knows her freedom and her duty towards the family. King Creon passes a decree that Polynice's dead body will not be buried, and if anyone does so, he or she will be punished. Antigone breaks the political law without hesitation and puts herself into the risk like a courageous man. Antigone's speech can be compared with the then political speakers who persuaded the audience in the assembly. Antigone bravely opposes the rules of the king, saying, "Nor did I deem that thou, a mortal man, could by a breath annul or override the immutable unwritten laws of heaven." Antigone, page 142. I would like to conclude the paper. Sophoclean female characters reflect modernness in terms of the way they think of themselves and the actions they perform. Both Electra and Antigone perform heroic actions. Chrysothemis and Ismene too are modern in their thoughts. They do not perform courageous tasks, but they remain struggling with the system in their own ways. They do not silently cultural system. Their ways of opposing are different from each other. Antigone and Electra are very brave that they put their lives into risk to resist their enemies or the social cultural systems that goes against the or that subordinates the women and their rights. Clytemnestra and Ismene show their resistance by their words. Clytemnestra is a courageous woman as Electra. Both have justice on their side, though Clytemnestra is the antagonist of the play Electra. Her reason to kill Agamemnon is noteworthy. Her action to kill her husband indicates her defense of the religious sacrifice of the girls. She looks at Agamemnon as a murderer of her daughter. The religious law of sacrifice is sacrificing the female girls opposed by Clytemnestra. Her action forces the audience to rethink of superstitious rituals that cause women to suffer. Overall, Sophocles, though a 5th century BC Greek playwright, his female characters are very modern in their actions as well as the way they perceive themselves. They think of themselves as men. They dream of getting name and fame and consider themselves as very noble and equal to men in their and perform heroic courageous actions as men. Thank you. If any questions
Thank
you
you,
may
Ma.
have.
Thank you. Thank you. Really, your presentation is very interesting. Your paper clearly deals with the study of a Sophoclean female characters, and you have talked about these two tragedies. Though women were suppressed, there were women characters like Electra and another one, Antigona, which could be taken as a model for us in future. And the way that you presented the paper really brought before us the tradition and culture of a Sophocles period. Ma, thank you. Thank you so much. Nice presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, Ma, that's all. Do you have any questions? Otherwise, we'll wind up the session. ಯಾರು? ಅದು ಇಲ್ಲ.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Now we have to move on the third technical session. I welcome Dr. Shrutimita Mehta, Assistant Professor, Center for Language Learning, the North Cape University, Gurugram, Haryana. I hand over the session to Dr. Shrutimita Mehta. Welcome, ma'am.
Ma, let me invite Abhilasha to present her paper. She is the next participant in the paper presentation. Ma, Abhilasha, are you present? Is there a scholar called Abhilasha waiting to present your paper?
She will join now. Please wait. She'll join.
Yes.
Okay, is Abhilasha present today? Are you ready to present your paper, ma? Let me invite Abhilasha to present her paper, please.
Yes, ma'am. Good
Okay,
afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon,
good afternoon.
everybody. The, the title of my paper is Revisioning Historiography of the Post-Colonial Literatures. Now when we refer to historiography, it means it is a notion wherein we refer to the historical subconsciousness, which emphasizes that literature was not simply the documentation of a singular mind, rather it is the final output of the historical ambience of that moment. Ambience means the surroundings, the environment. And history has provided contours of a shape to the literature, and literature in return has crystallized history in time. Let us take a few examples of the same. If we take Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, it was a 1958 novel, which is a very complex and a true classic. It is about the protagonist who life in an Igbo village and how that way of life is threatened irrevocably. Let us take another example, the interesting narrative of the life of Aluda Kuyano. Now he was born in Ibo, an area which is now a part of Nigeria. The protagonist was kidnapped and sold into the slave trade as a child, and then he was moved around from plantation to plantation and sold multiple times, enduring horrific treatment. Eventually, he was able to purchase his freedom and settle in London. And his autobiography, published in 1789, was so very read and influential that it helped spark the Slave Trade Act of 1807, ending slavery in Britain. That was the effect of literature of the time. Now let us take the last example of Joseph Conrad's The Heart of Darkness, which is a stunning, disturbing piece of colonial literature because it takes us to the colonized state of Africa, which also discusses the practice of imperialism. And Conrad isn't making an argument that everyone would be better off without empire. He's critiquing the process and commenting on its results, but this world is one where empires exist and without question. I would like to end my presentation here. Thank you, ma'am.
A very brief and nice presentation. Thank you, ma.